It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 675 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. That's 675. Hey, I have a good show lined up for you today. Join me first is my guest, Douglas Vigliotti. Doug is the author of a book titled The Salesperson Paradox, a strikingly simple way to provide solutions your customers can't say no to. And in our second segment, we'll be joined by my friend, Captain Fantastic, Bridget Gleason. Now, before we get to that, I want to talk with you about the Sales House. Now, the Sales House venture we just launched. It's the only all-in-one sales education community for the smart B2B seller. You want to come experience the hundreds of hours of educational courses and content from me personally, as well as other world-class sales experts, and join our live coaching hours, live workshops, and in-person meetups. It's all designed to accelerate your professional growth, shorten your learning curve, rocket your career to that next level. Now, it's a fact, you hear me talk about that sales training alone won't help you achieve your goals, won't get you where you want to go. I mean, there's more you need to learn about the art, the craft, and the true science of selling. Basically, everything about the human element of sales that training doesn't teach. So how to build relationships to connect with your buyers, engage their interest, build trust, and inspire them to take action. So to learn everything about sales that you didn't learn in training, then come visit us. Visit saleshouse.com/accelerate. That is thesaleshouse.com/accelerate. Take advantage of our special $1 trial offer. You can come in and experience everything we have to offer for just $1. So we'll see you at thesaleshouse.com/accelerate. Okay, let's jump into it today with my guest joining me, Doug Vigliotti, as I said before, author of The Salesperson Paradox, a strikingly simple way to provide solutions your customers can't say no to. Among the key points we're going to cover today is how to take a customer-first approach in your selling, meaning does the customer feel like they've won after a transaction with you? How to drive to a yes-no decision as early as possible. I think this is really important. How do you get that no-go, no-go decision made? Because if your pipeline's full of deals that end up in no decision, it means you didn't drive to that yes-no decision as early as you could have. And also, why you really need to avoid a stressful sales process. I mean, the customer experience during the sales process is hugely important. Doug's going to share with us ways to avoid that. So, all right, here we go. Douglas Vigliotti, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
So where are you based out of?
Based out of New Haven, Connecticut.
New Haven, Connecticut. So?
The world's best pizza.
I know. Which one?
I'm a Pepe's guy.
You're a Pepe's, me too. All right, good. I'm glad. We got that basis down. Pepe's it is. Anytime I'm up in that area, it's just like, I got to stop. I got to go.
I'm a big lobbyist for Pepe's. A big lobbyist. I love Pepe's. So.
Yeah. I've had it, I don't know, maybe only 3 times, but it's like, oh man, that was good. I have a friend in San Diego here where I am today that he's a New Haven kid, grew up New Haven, went to University of Connecticut, played baseball, but very much of a healthy eater. I mean, he's, but he makes an exception. So when he says, every time I go home to New Haven, he literally gets physically sick because he eats so much Pepe's pizza. He just indulges, and then he comes back and he's good the rest of the year. And
I think I can relate. That's like my comfort food. If I've had a rough go at it, I default to Pepe's.
Okay. So, what flavor? Last question about pizza before we.
Yeah. So I'm actually, and this kind of, I guess, will go hand in hand with that. You might be able to find some similarity to what we're going to talk about. I'm a very basic guy. I like the original tomato pie. So it's literally just the red sauce with pecorino romano cheese on top, grated on top, and a little shaved garlic, and that's it.
Sounds great.
It's delicious.
Yeah.
Absolutely delicious.
Until you have Pepe's crust. I mean, that's the thing that you just don't know pizza until you, and I know there are people adherents. I mean, I live in New York, so I mean, I love New York pizza as well. They're great pizza there, but yeah, Pepe's is memorable. All right. So you've written a book called The Salesperson's Paradox. So what's the paradox?
So the paradox is really just the thinking that roots performance. So it's this idea that in order to improve performance, selling performance mainly, you have to move away from selling into helping. It's the core idea of shifting. It's moving away from an innate me first mindset that we all experience as humans, not just salespeople, right? So if you're the way I like to talk about this is, or the way I like to show this example is, say we're at a party and we're with a bunch of friends, and you give your you want to take a photo, right? So you give the camera to a stranger. The stranger takes a photo of you and your friends. You get the camera back. Who's the first person you look at?
Yourself, yeah.
Yourself. So it's innate, and not only will we look at ourselves first, but we'll judge the picture off of how well we look. We'll tell you not to post it online. We might even retake the photo, and this is all before you even scan to see anybody else. So the point being is, this is innate. It's an innate thing. We're all me first. We all have a self-serving bias. If we're talking in cognitive, as a cognitive bias, it's just innate, and there's nothing wrong with that. But to be effective in selling, the first thing that you have to do is and it's a hard thing to do, is to move yourself away from that me first mindset into that customer first mindset, and move from selling into helping.
And is part of the paradox, as you see it, that we don't teach that to salespeople, or the fact that salespeople get to that stage in life where they're starting this career and they have to be taught that? I mean,
Yes.
part of it is socialization. I mean, we'd think, okay, yeah, we're sort of innately self-centered. There's a preservation instinct, I'm sure, associated with that. But as humans, right? I mean, you'd hope that people would say, yeah, what can I do to help somebody else, right? And I know it's not a majority of the population that takes that point of view, but even when we get to the point of recruiting people, I mean, is that something you can recruit for?
So I think what you're saying, and I'm in a total agreement, is there's a conditioning. There's a conditioning effect that happens both from society, our bosses, investors, that is sell, push, and it's conveyed in our movies. It's conveyed in all pop culture, in this idea of the smooth talking hustler, the slick talking salesman. And it's this pressure, especially at a young age. So if you're not brought along in the right manner and taught these core principles early enough, you fall victim to that societal assumption, just like society does. And then that weighs on you, and you start thinking about selling before you're thinking about anything else. When in all actuality, the only thing that you should be thinking about before anything is helping. And then that will flow into. So I have a sequence that basically looks like this. It's, when I ask people why they started in selling, they all say the same thing. Not all, 90%. I said the same thing. It's money, right? You start because you heard you can make money. You heard you can make a lot of money. So that's why you start. But in all actuality, that's not what's going to propel performance. So if all you're thinking about is money, you're missing the big picture. And to earn the money, to get the customer to move along with you, to sell your product, it's about helping the customer get what they want. And if you could do that, you're going to solve more problems. You're going to hit your quota. You're going to make more money. But it's the idea that you have to condition these young salespeople or older salespeople or business owners. I mean, I do a lot of work now with small business owners, and it's conditioning them to even feel and understand that it's a helping mindset that's going to push that along.
So what was the impetus to write the book? Because, it's a message I agree with, but it's not a new message, right?
Yeah.
So what were you seeing that told you, I need to talk about this?
Yeah, so totally. So I think one of the core ideas is it's as basic as, we're not selling anything. We have, and especially in the information age, because in the information age that we're living today, is the customer holds all the cards. We're not operating in the same manner that we once were as salespeople. We're not there to describe the product. We're not there to sell the customer. So the idea through writing this book was to have people understand how they can create solutions that customers actually want to buy from them, as opposed to selling a product or a service. So it was really that thinking. And then it was the fact that this stuff is, oftentimes when I'm talking with salespeople or I'm talking with business owners, they'll want to move along, right? They'll want to move past these basic ideas, these core principles. But really, you can't move past these core principles ever. It's in fact that simplicity compounded over time is what's actually going to get the results. So I needed to put that flag in the ground and showcase those core principles.
So the core principles being what?
So for me, it all stems from my iteration on solution selling.
Mm-hmm.
So I call it a cringe solution, and a cringe solution is cringe solution. Yes.
So like something is cringeworthy.
Like something is cringeworthy. So you come across it and you say you cringe to say no to it, right? Like so it's the buy one get one catch up. It's the solution in the B2B sale. It's anything. It's an overarching concept that guides what you're providing to the customer. And cringe is a framework. So that breaks down into the 6 pieces of my iteration on providing solutions to your customer.
Okay, so break down cringe, the 6 elements. Start at the top.
Totally, we'll start at the top. So we've already went over the first one. The first one is a mindset shift that needs to occur early on before you're doing anything tactically. And I should say before I start this that my philosophy is rooted in asking yourself, is rooted in strategy, not tactics. What I mean by that is tactics are going to be interchangeable. So it comes down to asking yourself the right questions early on. So that way, when you're in front of customers or when you're designing your sales copy or whatever you're doing, you're able to do that in an effective manner. So these are all based off of questions that you're going to need to ask yourself in order to be able to do the right things tactically. So let's start at the top.
So C starts for what?
Yep, customer first.
Okay.
So it stands for customer first, as in the general principle is moving from selling into helping, but it's ultimately asking yourself, does the customer feel like they've won after they've transacted with me?
Okay. Which
is a super important question to ask because I'll use great business thinker Peter Drucker. He once said, business is about creating and keeping a customer, right? And I firmly believe that. And so if you're putting the customer on a pedestal, and the number one thing that you have to take care of is your customer, and even more so, especially in today's age that we're living in, word of mouth is what drives business. So if your customer doesn't feel like they've won after they've conducted business with you, then they're not going to come back and do business again. And 2, they're not going to tell anybody about it. So it's an overarching concept that then you could break down into different tactics as you go down the pyramid, I guess you could say.
Right. But the thing that they have to feel like they won is not necessarily at the time you sign the order. It's when they're actually using your product.
Totally. So sometimes it's, we all experience buyer's remorse. We all experience cognitive dissonance when we're after we purchase a product. So the more things that you could do to mitigate that, the better off you're going to be able to check off that box. Does the customer feel like they've won? And it doesn't even necessarily, and I'm a big advocate of providing excellent service for your customer.
Sure.
But the feeling of them winning is more important than anything. They have to feel that as a customer.
So what's your strategy for preventing buyer's remorse?
That's a good question. So I think that the longer that you can extend the sales process, the better off you are. And the more touch points you have after the customer purchases, and the ability to educate them after the customer purchases is going to better enhance their experience, right? So a lot of times I see companies that once they purchase, it's now up to the customer, and that they're not providing adequate, I don't want to say support, but adequate an adequate post-transaction experience.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Well, you mentioned about extending the sales process. So what did you mean by that?
Not necessarily extending the sales process, the customer contact process. So you always want to remain in contact with your customer. You don't want to, you want to remain in contact with the customer even after they purchase your product or your service. And I think that a lot of times, especially if you're living in that old school selling mindset, push, sell, it's on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And it's volume, it's quantity over quality, but you've got to have that quality approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I advocate people do is, and this is something I did throughout my career, and because of lessons I learned, is that you have to remember that when your customers are in the process of buying something, and let's say it's a competitive sales situation, is that when they make their decision, in their mind, what they're buying is actually almost like a best of everybody they're talking to.
Yes.
I mean, it's when you're talking to multiple vendors, it's kind of a confusing process. And it's kind of hard to keep straight exactly what it is you're buying. And so I found, because I was selling some very large, complex systems, that the customers were oftentimes confused, as though when they signed the order, their expectations were set as some things in there that we really hadn't talked about. Maybe the competitors had talked about. So what I would do, and insist that people work for me did, is that when you close a deal, is the next day, pick up the phone, call the customer, and say, look, I just want to review what you purchased. And go through a process that we had defined. Say, look, what we're going to do is recap what your requirements were, what we proposed and why, because they met, why they met your requirements, what you bought, and what we're going to deliver and when. And when you go through that process, then you really go a long way to mitigating buyer's remorse, because part of what buyer's remorse is, again, it's a confusing time and confusing process for people, is they're really not sure what they bought. They are, but they aren't, right? And what it's really going to be like, and there's this period of uncertainty, and certain people have certain things at risk for having made the decision. Go back, reassure them, lay out everything about why they bought what they did, what you're proposing, why you proposed what you did, what they're going to get, and when. And I tell you, a lot of sales managers, a lot of salespeople, they sort of freak out at this prospect because they're afraid that if they pick up the phone and call the customer again so quickly, the customer might change their mind or do something.
Totally.
Never happens. Never happens. They love this call.
Totally. So that's a great example of exactly where I was going with keeping that customer contact post transaction. And you could even do a pre-transaction too, by being preemptive with disarming with, I call it disarming with competitive disadvantages. So you early on in your sales process, you disarm your customer with what you don't have, with what you can't do. So that way they're not disappointed if they do purchase, and they do purchase. They're not expecting that you to have a certain feature or a certain thing that you really don't have, but that has to happen up front, pre-purchase, right? That has to happen early in the sales process.
Interesting. Well, it has to happen within a certain context, I would presume.
Yeah. So I firmly believe that that's a huge trust builder. If you could prevent bad sales from happening, customers will be more apt to buy from you. They'll be more apt to purchase from you when the shoe fits, right? When the sale makes sense. So it's twofold. So yes, it has that benefit, but it also has the benefit of preventing buyer's remorse, because you're clearing objections out early on, that or not just objections, but you're disarming. You're saying what you aren't before you tell them what you are, and then they're not. You're not building them up and letting them off a cliff later on.
But it seems to me like that's really just part of qualification.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of qualification, but the question is, are people doing it? I don't know. I mean, that's I'm advocating what I think what I think should be done. I'm not advocating whether it's part of qualification.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is that qualification, I think, is the lack of efficient qualification or effective qualification. Excuse me. Is at least by various reports, is fairly problematic. I mean, throughout sales, is that there's a reluctance. Qualification does one thing, is it minimizes the number of people you have in your pipeline. And increasingly in certain segments there's a huge emphasis, especially more transactional, SaaS-based products, there's a huge emphasis on pipeline coverage. And sort of a series of sort of perverse incentives created to not do as good a job of qualifying or disqualifying prospects out of your pipeline. So I think what you talked about, I think the value really becomes, for me, as I look at it, is really in this qualification process. Yeah, I think one way that to define your value to someone is to make sure they understand what you don't do.
Yeah, I think I think it's extremely important. I think, again, going back to the general idea that there's of the societal pressure, the boss pressure, the selling pressure, sometimes that becomes challenging to execute on, although it is what you should be doing.
Right. Well, that's right. I said there are perverse incentives created to maximize the size of a pipeline, irrespective of whether it's really quality or not. And we see research reports that come out that say that the sort of range you see, it's sometimes it's 50 to 80% of qualified opportunities in a pipeline
don't fit.
Well, make the no decision. They don't make a decision at all. And that, from a sales perspective, certainly for me as a salesperson and as a sales manager, that was the worst outcome that could happen. I mean, I'd rather lose a deal. I'd rather lose a deal than have the customer say no decision, because then at least I knew that they were qualified to make a decision.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, I think early. I mean, there's a couple there's a couple of different ways that I could go with that. But I think definitely one of them is drive into a yes no decision as early as possible. Drive into a yes no decision is a basic principle. It's a basic concept that I definitely advocate. I don't think
yes no means they're going to make the decision whether to make a change or not.
Exactly. Your pipeline isn't full. Your pipeline isn't full if it's full of dead deals, right? So it's you have to understand if there, and you can actually identify that early on through different objection handling techniques, right? Like, so if you're in a qualification period and you don't understand, if you're in a qualification period and the lack of quality of questions coming back to you is low, then you know that this customer is really not that interested. So you should really pay attention to not just the questions you're asking, but the quality of questions that are coming back to you, because these are things that are going to help mitigate those dead deals or those no decision deals that are in your pipeline earlier on in the decision-making process.
Yeah, no, I think that's one indicator. I think there are other indicators. I believe that if the customer doesn't have a vision of what this product is going to do for them and can quantify. They haven't put together actually. This is what we expect. This is what we expect to receive from using this product. Whether it's we quantify it into dollars, market share, top line growth, bottom line growth, whatever, cost efficiencies. There has to be a metric or two that they have quantified. Not just they're thinking they've quantified, and if they haven't gotten to that point, they haven't made that go, no go, yes, no decision.
Totally. I couldn't agree with you more. It's got to be ultra specific to the client. I mean, you've got to, and when I say, and I advocate this all the time, is, there's got to be a reason why they're going to want to move forward. And you've got to find that early, and you've got to find the quantifiable metric that you're going to be able to go back to them and utilize to benchmark whether they should or they shouldn't from a financial standpoint.
Well, not only benchmark, but qualify your own product. This is a part that I think most sellers miss. Is okay. You may quantify. Most sellers miss the quantification, but if you've quantified the buyer's desired outcome and they've quantified it, then the next step is okay. Can you show them that you actually help them achieve that?
Yeah. How do you build the bridge?
And if you can't do that, then you don't have a qualified prospect.
Totally.
But
I agree.
Most people just blast right by that.
I agree.
Boom. They said they want to buy something sort of like ours, so they must be qualified.
I agree. I think all these situations get very, very nuanced, right? So it's but I totally agree with you.
Yeah, actually, it's funny about qualification, though, is I think it's less nuanced than people think. I think it's a process that people need to follow that they're not taught. Again, because managers oftentimes have incentives to have a certain pipeline coverage as well, and so
Yeah.
in certain
Top-down pressure.
industries, we have top-down pressure, corners get cut, it just compounds, and then you get a result where you've got a really low close rate. You might have great lead flow, but you have a really low close rate. And it's like, well, it doesn't need to be this way. So
Yeah, it usually has to do with prospects, right? It usually has to do with the quality of the leads in the pipeline to get go. So yeah, totally
yeah,
agree.
well, right, and so it brings back to sort of another issue you were sort of alluding to earlier in terms of simplicity. Is that I'm a huge believer in simplicity in sales, as you are, and clear from your book. But when you look at situations like why do we have such a high rate of no decisions taking place in pipelines and so on, is because we have fundamentally failed at sort of the human level of selling, connecting, engaging, building trust, so we can get to the point of really effectively qualifying or disqualifying somebody. And unfortunately, too often sales are taught these days is you qualify, you disqualify. It's sort of a high level type thing. And actually, you really can't finally qualify someone until you've actually built that relationship and you built the trust up, so they're going to reveal some of this information to you.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's you've got to set the rules, the boundaries at a certain. You have to set the rules early on in the relationship. You got to set the boundaries to where they need to be early on, so that way, I'm a firm believer that you can't have a sales process under tension, right? So the more you can do to set those boundaries, set those rules of how the interaction is going to look early on. How the process is going to look, how everything is going to look, the more you can lower that tension, the more you're going to be able to build trust with the customer, right? I mean, it's no secret that tension is bad for relationships. So the more that we could do to minimize that tension is going to build that trust. And I also.
So what you're saying is tell the prospect what the buying process, selling process is going to look like.
100%, and then getting their buy-in that they're okay with it. It's even. Rules are collaborative. They're not set by you. So you still have to get their buy-in. So it's, yes, this is how I intended to go. Are you okay with that? Yes. Okay, great. Let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a I'm the dictator. I'm going to lay down the law. It's the idea that once you have a collaborative, and then that also starts to build unity, right? And so when you start building unity, you can start leveraging what I call same team approach, where now you're on the same team trying to solve the problem at hand, as opposed to fighting against each other. Because everything changes inside of a sales process when once you and the client feel like you're not defeating each other anymore and you're trying to solve the problem at hand. That's like the golden rule. Once that happens, or not the golden rule, but that for me, that's like once that happens, now you're in the driver's seat, because now you're working together. One of the earliest things that you could do to ignite that is setting rules, getting buy-in early on, right? And then building off of things like we talked about before, disarming with competitive disadvantages, things you're not going to, building that trust early on in the relationship to decrease tension. I mean, I have 4 pillars of trust building.
Which are?
Yeah. So one of them obviously is honesty. So honesty is, a lot of times, and I know it's simple, but it's the more honest you can be, and the more consistent you are with you being honest, what you don't have, what you do have, all that little stuff, the higher your trust level is going to go. Listening is another one. This is another thing that, we have an idea of what we want to say before the call starts. That's fine, right? You want to have a pre-conversation focus session, what have you, but you've got to answer what the customer is saying, because ultimately it's to give them what they want, right? That you're trying to build that bridge between what you have and what they want, and you can't do that without listening. The third piece is be a resource. So you got to be honest, you got to listen, you have to be a resource, you have to be able to add value and educate, and then the fourth piece is you got to deliver on your word. So no matter what you say inside those boundaries, that rule setting, what you say the product can do, what you say it can't do, what you say you can do, what you say you can't do, you have to be able to deliver. When you say you're going to do something, now it's your obligation to deliver. Those 4 things are my pillars of trust building.
Okay. Yeah, I mean they're not dissimilar from the ones that I use that are really based on work from Stephen M. R. Covey and his book Speed of Trust. Are your motives transparent to the prospect? Do you have integrity, which aligns with your honesty? Is that do your words align with your actions? And
or Robert Cialdini would call that consistency influence, where everything aligns.
Right. Are you competent? And can you execute? Which matches what you talked about as well. So, cool. So, let's just running close to time here, and we've had a great conversation. So, just last question is I'm sort of curious about this.
We only got to the C in the framework.
Well,
that's all right.
We follow our muse.
I know. I don't mind.
You'll give people information about where they can buy the book, and we're just teasing it out for them here.
No, I'm kidding. Totally.
So, well, let's talk about your book for a second. So, your book, Salesperson's Paradox, available on Amazon, everywhere else.
It's available on Amazon. It has an ebook, audiobook, and print. So you can get all three options. That's the only place that it's available. Actually, just a month ago, my team and I, we put it on Kindle Unlimited. So right, if you're a Kindle Unlimited user, you can actually go and read it for free right now. So
read it for free. So how do you get paid? How do you get paid on that?
So Kindle Unlimited really just works on page views. So you're in what's called the Amazon Global Fund, and based on a certain percentage of page views that are read, you get a certain percentage. So,
all right. So people listening to the show, if you go get Doug's book on Kindle Unlimited, at least scan through to the end of the book, right?
I don't know.
Page by page, just hit that right arrow till you get all the way to the end. We'll make sure you get good full benefit out of that.
Yeah, no, it's fine. The ebook I only sell for $2.99 anyway. So
all right.
So
okay, well, Doug, unfortunately, we're out of time. So do tell people how they can find out more about you, and obviously, we know they can go to Amazon to find the book.
Yeah, totally. So it's very, very simple. Just go to my name, DouglasVigliotti.com. Everything flows through there. I write 1,000 to 1,500 word article once a month. I do a reading list every month as well, where I recommend 3 books that I've read. A big reader.
So what's the last non-sales book you read?
Oh, I read tons of non-sales books.
I know. Which one did you recommend?
The last book that I just read was When by Daniel Pink, The Science of Timing, the scientific, so that was the last one that I read, but I often read books that are not sales based. In fact, probably my favorite sales book other than my own was by Chet Holmes, Ultimate Sales Machine.
Sales Machine, right?
That's one of my go-tos. The other one that's a big go-to for me is Jay Abraham's getting what is it? I can't think of it. It's
that's okay.
I can't think of it. Anyway, those are my. Other than that, I stay with primarily psychology. I do a lot of history, stuff like that as well. So primarily nonfiction, but I don't read too many sales books,
which is probably healthy for you.
Yeah,
I think people should be reading sales books, but they need to leaven their reading list with non-sales books as well.
I'm a big advocate of pulling from parallel industries and pulling. You're not going to be, if you're doing what everybody else is doing, then you're not going to be able to get. You're not going to be able to get exponentially ahead, right? So it's pull small concepts from other industries, implement them in your own, and I think you're going to see increased results that way. So that's the philosophy that I kind of live by.
Yeah, well, people who follow the show, listeners, readers know that awesome. My philosophy is from Thomas Huxley, 19th century British writer. In life, you should try to learn something about everything and everything about something. So
I love it. I love it.
So be widely read and then master what you're working on. So you got to do both. It's not an or, it's an and. All right, Douglas, great to talk to you. Great to meet you. And look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, Andy, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. All right, thank you, Doug. Okay, friends, that was Doug Vigliotti, author of The Salesperson Paradox, a strikingly simple way to provide solutions your customers can't say no to. Up next, my fantastic co-host, Bridget Gleason. Now, today, Bridget and I tackle the topic of routines. Daily routines. Why you need to have set routines in your day, like in the morning or in the evening. And we'll get into how to optimize these routines to help you achieve your goals. And that's a really important topic because, it's very topic of the day, if you will, because lots of books being published about this right now. I love talking about it because routines, as I said, are so important. All right, let's jump into it. Bridget, how you doing?
I'm back to being fantastic. I'm back to feeling good and fantastic and just happy to be doing what I'm doing.
Grateful to be alive. Grateful to be alive, yes. So are you able to be running?
Hell yeah.
Okay, well, you had surgery.
No, it's a good question because I didn't for 2 weeks, which is the longest I haven't run in so long. 2 weeks I didn't run.
Yeah. Well, how long?
2 weeks.
How long do you think it's been that you hadn't run for 2 weeks? 10 years? 20 years?
I can't remember a time.
Time immemorial?
Time immemorial, like years. Like I'm so just pathetic. Like I'm like a little white rat about having to do these things. I like my habits and routines.
Yeah, well, clearly, right? Well, it's funny. So as I think you probably know, we launched the Sales House recently.
Congrats.
And thank you. And it's going extremely well. And so I've sort of changed up how I'm communicating with the audience. I used to have the weekly newsletter. Now I'm doing daily bits and bytes. But yeah, personalizing a little bit and talking about my morning routine. And it's funny, a lot of people have written in already and said, A, I want to learn more about morning routines, and B, here's mine. What do you think? So on and so forth. But I wondered, is so for you with your morning routine, you run religiously. Do you log your runs? Do you say, okay, every day I ran X amount, the weather was like this, my knees felt good, my hips felt great, or, whatever. Do you track that?
No.
Okay.
Here, exclamation point. And I used to time everything and run. And I was doing more, like I would run marathons. I ran a lot.
Yeah.
And I timed it. Am I faster? And how far did I go today? And I was religious about it. And now I decided I've got, and this, I stopped that a number of years ago. I've got enough things that I am measuring myself on. Like I'm very competitive with myself.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
I don't need to add another one. I decided I need to go on give myself like a mental health break around my exercise and just, I listen to podcasts. I listen to books. Mm-hmm. It's more meditative while I'm running than because the rest of the day, the rest of the day, I'm a little, so I just need a time. My morning routine is the chill.
All right. So take us through it. You wake up
with any luck at all.
Yeah.
And I wake up at 4.
Without an alarm.
Without an alarm. No, I don't need an alarm.
Okay. So you wake up at 4.
I wake up and I wake up at 4 enthusiastic.
First thing out of your mouth.
Honestly, sometimes I look at the clock.
What a beautiful day.
I'll see 3 and I'll think, it's not time to get up yet. Like I love morning. I'll get up, make an espresso, so have some coffee, and I will read the New York Times.
Before you run?
Yeah.
Okay.
Read the New York Times and write in my journal. So I write every morning, every day. And then I'll go out and I'll do a run. And lately, I'm in the office. I usually leave the office around 6:30, 6:45. Makes for a long day.
Yeah, because you're not waking up in the morning. You're waking up in the night.
Because I'm waking up in the night.
We should talk about Bridget's night routine, which ends up being a morning routine.
I know. So I'm wired for mornings. So the important things for me in the morning are coffee, a little reading, just like what's going on in the news, writing in my journal, and exercise. And then I feel like I've done these things for me, and I shower. Okay. I don't just go in.
Thank God. Yes.
I do these for me. And then
I think you shower for the people in your office, but
I shower for the people in the office. Then I can go and be in the world and do things, then I can go give to others. But I do need to do those things for me before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I exercise virtually every morning. I mean, there are odd day perhaps when I don't, whether it's biking, running, swimming, that sort of vary based on where I am, which which coast I'm on. And but yeah, let's say I get up probably 5:30. I mean, maybe a little bit later.
That would have seemed early if you had gone first.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, now it seems like I'm a abject slacker. Yes.
Right.
Well, I probably stay up a little later than you do. I hope. Hopefully, you're getting more of that sleep.
Do you stay up past 8?
Yeah. Well.
Okay.
Sometimes I'm asleep at 8, but it's not, I'm on the couch.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm in bed and asleep between 11:30, and get up roughly usually around 5:30. Yeah, I don't really have to set my alarm to do that after all these years, and yeah, I'll read a little bit first, typically. Scan the news, see what's going on, which I think is really important. And I urge salespeople, if you're not reading the news, some people, there's a lot of debate about what you should read first, or they should, journal first, or read, something for your profession first. I think spending 15 minutes just keeping abreast of what's going on in the world is really useful for anybody whose job is to talk to other people in this world, right?
Right. I agree.
So the naysayers that say don't do that, yeah, you're wrong. Or I disagree, let's say, to be more gentle about it. So yeah, I'll catch up on the news. Then, yeah, I tend not to journal formally because I'm usually writing something every day anyway. So I'll, then go exercise, whether it's go hop in the pool or hop on my bike, or as I did this morning, just go out and put in a quick 4 miles. It was horrible. I'm in San Diego today when I was recording this, and in the West Coast office of our vast empire, and it was humid. It was 86% humidity this morning, and so it felt like, why did I leave New York to escape the humidity to come here?
And to come to San Diego to be in, yes.
It was like, when did San Diego turn into Washington, D.C.? So it was a little bit of a slog this morning. We can add that. Remember last week we talked about glom and oomph.
And oomph, and so now we've got slog.
We got slog again.
I think there are the habits and routines. We're talking about the ones that we have that are personal, but I think it's so important in sales to be able to establish habits and routines as well. Because the thing about them is then that energy, when something's a habit, let's say it's for cold calling or for, we've talked about reading or for educate, whatever it is, whatever habit you get into, you then are not needing to tap into an energy supply to get you to go do it. It's already become something that you do, and you can use the energy that you've got for more creative pursuits and strategizing on accounts, things that you can't make so routine. I think routines and discipline are so important in sales.
Yeah, and I'm, as you are, clearly, a huge believer in exercise. And I was talking via email with one of my readers this week about morning routine, and he was sort of talking about the fact that he it wasn't quite as regular as he wanted to be, and in getting out and running every morning or exercising every day, and to comment about how he felt the difference. And I think that this is, we live in we work in an environment, especially in sales, that requires a lot of energy, a lot of putting on a good face when you're talking to people, even sometimes when you're not feeling fantastic, like perhaps you were over the last couple of weeks. Exercise sort of gives you that grounding, that energy to face the world and to be able to actually have the endurance to go throughout an entire day.
Yeah, and for me also, I guess I send a message to myself every day that I have a goal and I accomplish it, because I am a person who accomplishes a goal, or I set out to do something. I'm a person who sets out what I say I'm going to do. And it's just this message that I send myself of who I am and who I want to be. And like you said, you come to you translate that into work. It does give you more energy. It also is just a reminder. Yeah, when I set myself to do something, I do it. Mm-hmm. And it was just before this call, I was meeting with one of my sales directors who was frustrated that someone on his team, one of the SDRs, had a goal of 100 emails and 90 calls for a week, which is not high. It's a relatively low target. And he hit 90 emails and 63 calls. And my sales director was baffled, as was I. Like, why would you not hit the goal? Like, why would you stop short of hitting that goal? And I think there's also something for me about discipline and exercise, that I'm goal oriented. I say I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. I have a plan to run every day, I'm going to run. I have a plan to make this calls, I'm going to make this number of calls. And I don't stop until I do it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's some of that transference that I also think is really important and beneficial.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you talk about this idea, as we often do with reps, about blocking time for specific activities in your day, you do that on the personal side as well. And so it's, one discipline is very similar to the other. If you're blocking 2 hours in the morning, every morning to make calls or do your outreach, block an hour even before you get up, or not before you get up, before you go to work, to exercise, take care of yourself.
I would sometimes like to block my exercise before I get up. And I'd love to have it done before I get up, if that's possible.
Yeah.
Like, exercise is done before I get up.
There are days where it's just hard.
And I think that somebody once said to me, "Oh, you're lucky. You love to exercise." It's like, no, I don't. I do it.
Oh, I love it.
I don't. I don't love it. I should say I don't love it every day.
Yeah, that's different. Sure.
I don't love it every day. So there are a lot of days, gosh, especially in Boston, come winter. You think I want to get up and go running, trudging in the snow? I will tell you right now, no, I do not.
Yeah, and you're not running on a treadmill in a gym. You're outside.
I know. So that's all discipline at that point.
Yeah.
And sometimes like a little crazy in the head, but.
Yeah, I think running in a major city at 4:30 in the morning is not always the wisest thing to do.
Well, I don't. It's not 4:30 when I run, because I've got to do.
You got your other things.
Probably
right.
5:30. It's probably 5:30.
It's still dark 30 for the most part.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is oftentimes dark 30. Yeah, you're right. Dark 30. That's good. I like that. Dark 30.
Yeah.
Yes. True.
Yeah, I mean, some days it'll be similarly dark when I take off on my run in Manhattan, but that's an incredibly safe city. Not all places I don't want to go out and run at that time, but yeah. It was interesting. Last week, Vicky and I were taking a little vacation. We had some points to use that were going to expire. And so I said, well, let's see if we can we had some time. A few days we wanted to take off. I said, so what can we do at this minimal number of points? It's like, what can we afford? So we go through, it was the SPG website. And what we could afford was Palm Desert, California.
In August?
Yeah, where the average temperature was, I don't know, I think 106 or something last week.
I know that because that's where my family would go in the summer also because it was cheap. You know, I'm one of 7 kids. I'm one of kids. We went to Palm Desert.
And
Zora.
Right. So we show up at the resort and the place is
the pool's dry.
No, the place is just packed for the exact reason you talked about. Full of families with young kids taking advantage of the inexpensive rates and I'm like, okay, how do the kids understand? They're having a good time. They're on the water slides and bouncing around and so on. But it's like the parents have to sit there and watch them. And it was literally like setting up your lawn chair inside your oven. I mean, when you walked outside, I know people are fascinated by this. It's such a sales conversation, but when you walked outside from your air-conditioned condo unit, it's like that feeling you get when you're baking something in the oven, you open the door and sort of stick your head down to look at it, and you get this, blast of heat in your face. It was like that every time I walked outside. I didn't do a lot of running last week. We did go out for a bike ride. We took our bikes, and we did do a bike ride. It was like 95 when we left the house, like at 6:30, something like that. And it didn't get any warmer, or any colder, excuse me. But fortunately, there was a little bit of a layer of overcast, so it wasn't real brutal, but still, I did my running. I did my running indoors last week.
Did you feel like that was a good use of points?
Well, they were going to expire, so sure.
Okay, as long as it wasn't like more painful.
No, we actually had a good time. We caught up on movies. We went to 10 a.m. showing of shows of movies, and we were, I think in one case, we were the only ones in the theater at 10 a.m. And
so you had a private theater.
Yeah, and there was one of those nice theaters with that usually charge like $20 with the reclining seats and so on. It was only $7 a head at 10 a.m. in the morning. Wow. And so we saw a few movies. There are actually some very nice restaurants in that area we went to, and again, it wasn't hard to get into them but I think because there are so many families. Like we went to the grocery store a couple times, they were packed. So it was really interesting as the places were packed. And my parents took us to Palm Springs once when we were kids, and my only memory really was my dad picking us up and carrying us across the pool deck to throw us in the pool because the deck was too hot to touch with our bare feet.
How did we get on this?
I don't know, but here we are.
Here we are talking about discipline and how running, discipline and habits and how they transform and morning routines. And
if you work in sales long enough and travel enough, you get all these points you have to use for various things.
What I would say is maybe if we had to net the benefit of this particular exchange we've had.
Yes.
Is sales is about relationships, and it's about conversations, and it's about, as we talked about, tuning into reading the news is so that when you start, I've had lots of conversations like this, maybe not quite as long like this, with prospects and customers. And it's important if you've got a range of things and experiences that you can, it's almost like improv, talk about and build like improv. On. You're going to end up having just a richer experience and a prospect that's more likely to open up and share things. And it's also just more interesting. It's more fun. Exactly. I always love getting to know my prospects and customers and what they're doing. And I think that's one of the greatest perks of the job.
I agree. Actually, somebody had sent me an email this morning, one of my members saying, what's the best first question to ask somebody? And he wanted my opinion on what he said. And his first question, which is actually very similar to ones that I use, and sometimes use on this show with guests other than you, is, so where are you from? And it's like, okay, sure. People, that's a great conversation starter. People like to talk about where they're from.
It's a great one. And it's non-threatening. It's not too personal, but it can be as personal as you want it to be. It's a great first question. Great opening question.
Right. And to your point about if you take the time to read a little and read about the world and experience the world, travel some, when you ask that question, people come back with an answer. It's like, yeah, you'll have something to contribute. You've read something about where they're from. You know something about what their area, maybe something they're interested in. Oh, hey, you're from such and such. Have you ever, gone to this museum or what have you? It works. It's a great thing. You just have to hold up your end of the bargain and be informed.
That's it.
All right, Bridget.
All right.
Wow, we covered a lot of ground. I wouldn't say we followed a straight line anywhere today. No,
there was no straight line. I like it.
But we covered a lot of ground. Yeah, and people learned a lot about you and about me. So there you go. All right,
whether
Bridget,
they wanted to or not.
Whether they want. Well, hey,
Andy,
they could always, and maybe they have by now. They've turned this off, so who knows? But
it's just you and I talking to ourselves.
It's likely that is the case, but we had a good time. All right, Bridget, until next time, it's been fantastic.
And likewise, have a good one. Stay cool.
Yeah, we'll try. I'm a month from fall, right? I'm anxious for fall to be here already. So
don't get anxious for winter, though.
No, but I have an escape hatch, so it works for me. So
yes, you do. You do.
Talk to you later. Right. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for the week. First of all, I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to thank my guests, Douglas Vigliotti and my friend Bridget Gleason. Join me again next week as I welcome my friend Jeff Shore back to Accelerate, I think for maybe the third time, maybe the fourth time. And we're going to be talking about decision-making shortcuts. Now, it's not shortcuts in the sense of like a hack or something you're thinking. Something much more important, a little more subtle, but something that really help you get the customer on track to make a decision. So come back. Join me for that one. I want to thanks again to our sponsor, Discover.org, for their ongoing support of Accelerate. And thank you again for joining me. Until next week, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.